So we're ready to actually start Balance of Powers. And the first thing we have to do is deal with the Crisis of July. There's no randomness in this. It's kind of a choose your own adventure for two people. I think it might grow tiresome if you played this as a competitive game. I think the flavor of this is sort of the let's explore this, kind of cool format here as a way of setting up the game. But let's see. At the very least, the powder keg ends up being random. So the first thing is we have the assassination. The first, the thing that no powers on the board have any control over. I like that. I like that the players are really put in the role of the powers, political leaders in a sense. So Austria-Hungary has two choices. One, I can seek support from Germany. That gets me a war guilt point. Or I could hit Serbia. Now, if I hit Serbia, let's see, a punitive bombardment of the Fort Kalimangan from river monitors, along with a nasty cavalry, satisfies public calls for justice and challenges Russian prestige. But their pinpricks inflict no real damage. So nationalists throughout Eastern Europe conclude that the old empires are vulnerable to revolution, hence the powder kegs. Thus, revolutionary intrigues fester unless Russia takes action to defend the Balkan sphere of influence. Russia has to choose to either skip over to step 5, which will be part of the normal military buildup, or throw it into the powder keg. Well, the powder keg, I think is more likely to favor the Entente powers, if I recall correctly. Romania against Austria, Italy against Austria, or the possibility of Courland. It's tempting to divert some of these initial choices that the Germans throw out. I'm going to randomize this decision because, like I said, it is tempting. Even if it means there's going to be a problem with Romania or Italy. In both cases, neither's a terrible thing. Romania historically goes over to the Entente anyway. Italy historically goes over to the Entente. Italy is going to be very hard to convince to join the Central Powers just because there's too many bribes on the Italian border. There's only one on the Italian-Austrian border. There's only one on the French border, so it's kind of skewed in favor of the Entente. It would suck, but okay. And Romania, well, likewise, we have a couple of locations on the Romanian border. Now, the one thing that might work to our advantage is there's at least one. I don't know, this may be too far away, but at the very least, Niš could be offered to the Romanians if it came to that. But not if I offer it to the Bulgarians, who have a kind of nice little army. All right. Odds we go with historical, but I'm very tempted by the other, so. Okay. Austria is going to throw it into Russia's court. They do a quick punitive strike. And the war is not proceeding as it was. Now, for the Tsar, he has the option to take some of the war guilt himself or to vacillate. If he goes forward with the Russian choice. If he takes the A, Serbia acquiesces to most but not all of Austria-Hungary's demands. Hey, that's what they did historically. Russia loses face. The Austrians are left wrangling with Serbian officials about how to implement their supervision of the judicial process. Make a DDR And if it's less than 3, Russia takes a point of demoralization and then jump to powder keg. Well, I clearly don't want to make the vassalization. So the question is, do I want to take some war guilt on, or do I want to go to the powder keg right away? Oh boy. Tempted to go to the powder keg. So what is the advantage of going to war? Going to war means Serbia's on our side. Courland will not revolt. I think we're likely to move ahead. So I'm only going to go on a 6 to the powder keg. We don't get that 6. So now there's a war guilt of -1, and I'm going to mark that with a white die to indicate the guilt is leaning towards the Entente. I'll use the darker die for the Central Powers. Well, now it's up to Britain. What's up with Britain? Well, Grey can propose a 4 powers conference. That doesn't hurt at all. Or he can warn Germany of British support for France. Now, if Grey overtly supports France, that'll shock Germany, which had discounted the possibility of British intervention. However, his unilateral action throws Parliament into turmoil. Britain must make a DDR. I don't like the idea of the DDR. Again, I think that's a bad outcome, so I'm only going to follow it on a 6. All right. So we go with the historical, which doesn't change the war guilt, and that's going to throw us down to the next step. Now, Gottlieb von Jagow suggests direct Austro-Russian talks, but does nothing to encourage the Austrians. That's the historical. Or he can press the Austrians to talk to the Russians, reducing war guilt. If he does this, this could hurt the Austrian with the DDR. Again, I think that's a bad choice, trading war guilt for that. I've already got a -1 in my favor. I'm going to give this a 6. And we go forward with the natural direct talk suggestion, but nothing to encourage them. Okay, now Austria can declare war on Serbia. That clears this out. Or we can deliberate. If Austria fails to take decisive action, it lets the crisis pass, but emboldens the nationalists. That goes to a powder keg. Well, you know, I see these as equal values. Whether or not, we cut our deal with Serbia. I think I'm going to make it 50-50 in this case. Odd in favor of the historical. We go with the historical, and that cancels out the -1 on the war guilt table. Now it's up to Russia. Sazonov advises the Tsar to initiate general mobilization. That increases Entente guilt, or watchful waiting. If Russia's failure to take decisive action to defend Serbia results in a local Austro-Serbian conflict that'll end in stalemate and reduce Russia's influence, a DDR and then powder keg, and ignore any result that indicates Sweden starts in the CP. Sweden will be a true neutral. Sweden's an opportunistic power who can be promised something. I'm not sure what, but conceivably they can end up allied to the CP. I don't like that, so again I'll go only on a 6, and we do not get that. So the Russians mobilize, and we're back up to that -1. Or down, how you want to put it. Germany. Chief of General Staff Moltke the Younger writes to his Austrian counterpart, Austria-Hungary must be preserved, mobilize at once. That adds 2 to the war guilt. On the other hand, Moltke could defer to civilian authorities, subtracting 1. Okay, I see absolutely no penalty to ignoring that unless I really want the war guilt. The benefit to the war guilt, I don't see it. Because I'm actually looking at, for the Germans, trying to avoid a war with Belgium. In particular, I think that that's a really, really powerful option, and I want to see how it plays out. So, given that fundamental decision that I've made already prior to the game, I am definitely going to give the deferment to the civilians. And that puts it to -2. France can refuse the ultimatum to cease mobilization. That sends the war guilt even further. Or they can halt it, canceling the war guilt out. If the Germans mobilize before the French, during the first fortnight, all German land attacks against French get an additional +1 land combat roll, and French land units cannot move except to retreat as required. That sounds terrible. I mean, really terrible. But I don't want to discount it completely. Unlike the previous one, I don't have a real plan here for the Allies. I do have one for the Germans. So on a 6, at the very least, I'm going to consider it. I'm not going to consider it. Okay. So we are not going to halt mobilizations. So war guilt goes to a -3. Okay, the Germans have the option to full mobilize and declare war against Russia, or partial mobilization and no declaration of war, subtracting 2 more from war guilt. If the German 11th hour caution reduces war guilt but invites Berlin's worst nightmare, German corps cannot move during the first fortnight and must still follow normal setup requirements, including at least 9 adjacent to Liège and no more than 6 east of the hex columns, but they're exempt from the usual Schlieffen Plan scenario. This may be the only reasonable way to avoid Schlieffen Plan in my view. France begins as an opportunistic neutral that can be courted immediately rather than having to wait until March. If using optional neutral entry, then France and Britain each roll separately. We're not going to use that. Regardless of which diplomacy rules are used, the British have not joined the EP by the end of September 1914. Then the Swedes joined during the diplomacy phase. Well, we want to do that. That sounds like everything we want here, so we're boosting this to a -5. Then we go to the war guilt table, and with -5, it is almost assured, but not quite. Yeah, oh boy, that the Entente have the war guilt here. So, what is our situation precisely? The Russians have backed the Serbians, so the Serbians are in the war. The French are not in the war. However, they can be called in fairly early. Britain, I don't have to do Schlieffen, so honestly, this is exactly what I wanted, with a few negatives to it. One, I gave them the war guilt advantage, or disadvantage, however you want to look at it, but I gave them the advantage of the offensive. However, Russian mobilization rules are still in place. They can't do anything in the first fortnight either, and neither can the Austrians. So that first fortnight of August, nothing's happening. However, the French might declare war on the first turn of the game. And the Germans have nothing to offer, whereas the Russians are going to be able to offer quite a bit of German territory to the French. So we're probably going to see a starting Plan 17 smashing into the Germans. Now, if the French don't follow Plan 17, they lose 4 corps. And obviously, they're on the offensive, so they want to do this. So we'll see. And I think we're ready to play. And it ain't World War I, but it's pretty close to what I was aiming for. Now, if the powder table had gone off, Serbia and Montenegro would end up neutrals. I hope opportunistic neutrals, but it's not clear. And Um, Courland could be a central power. I'm just curious about this. They have rules for it. But the thing that's kind of weird to me, I want to look at the initial. See, what I don't see is what happens to all monthly reinforcements due to have arrived before May arrive in June 1915. All seasonals due to arrive from OB before summer 1915 start in the force pool for procurement. Okay, so it actually handles the reinforcements. It handles an idea that the national forces have been in a tense position beforehand. That was something I was a little worried about, that I'd have to fudge that or fly that. But actually the rules seem to have hammered down this thing. Now, like I said, this is something that probably can be gamed to your advantage. I had one particular goal in mind, and I quite quickly see that, yeah, it got me there. I don't know that I needed to get the war guilt as far negative as I had, whether Austria had to do, wanted to necessarily try to avoid the war, but the Central Powers have really been very non-militaristic about this whole thing, right? All right. So, I guess we're going to be starting, and the first thing, as we look here, we don't have a seasonal turn. We're in August 1914. It's the diplomacy phase. Only France can be called, and the Germans are going to do it, or the Russians are going to do it. Which means what? We have to find the rules. Oh, there we go. All right. The players can entice. Bargaining chip must be outside of but within 3 hexes of the neutral's border. Okay? Now, what's kind of interesting here is whatever I offer isn't going to be available to anyone else, but I don't know that there's anyone I could offer it to. Belgium's a true neutral here. So I have 1 there, 2, and I think that's it. So I can offer, it looks like, 2 of the locations to the French. Now, that's going to give me I have to pay a resource point from Russia. They're the only ones with points to bring the French in. I'm offering 2. The Germans can't offer anything. We have no enemy except Russia, and there's just nothing we can give. We can't offer anything in Russia to the French. They don't care about any of it. So I'll roll a die, and I believe my total modifiers are 2. And that is it. So let's see. This will be at -2. So if I get a 4 or less, the French join the war. Otherwise, I don't remember what the victory conditions are. Okay, so France is declaring war as well. Okay. Now, the English are an imperial neutral, and Germany is not violating Belgium or the Netherlands. They're not near France. They don't have their naval units out at sea. Russia's not in crisis, and Italy did not join the Central Powers yet. They might. Okay. In which case, theoretically, I've offered a couple of spoils out here. Again, I'm just going to say theoretically because I don't know that the counters really need to be on the board. And those can't be used by anyone else for spoils. So, all right. So Britain's not entering the war. They could automatically enter. And we have nothing new that we can build, except we could buy some infrastructure if we so desired. And I want to consider that. The answer is probably not, but there may be some areas where the rail lines are really annoying. I know here going through Luxembourg, the rail lines are obnoxious. And then down here they kind of look ugly too, where like the French don't have a rail line running through here. So if I took this hex, I would not be in supply. And it kind of limits where I can launch my attacks. Well, where I might want to. The Russians, so only the French are going to be moving in the first phase, in the first fortnight. The Russians, they have their 2 rail lines moving forward that they really want to follow. So I think they're okay without infrastructure. I don't have a lot of money. I hope that's at 7. I'm not positive. I don't have a lot of cash, so there's not a whole hell of a lot that I'm going to want to do. I'm not really going to want to spend that limited cash I have on infrastructure. I think I've got to make 2 attacks with the French minimum, which doesn't leave me a lot of money for taking losses or anything. And I've got 2 fortnights to handle things. So, and yeah, I know I'm taking things really slowly here. There's not going to be any aviation, and now I'll consider whether or not I'm going to sail my ships out. The French Navy is up here challenging the Germans rather than the Austrians. Not sure if that's wise, but it's what I chose. So one other thing I should be taking into account in the diplomacy phase is violation of neutrals. I think the French are going to declare they're going to violate Luxembourg. There's no cost to it, but I can't enter Luxembourg unless I do. Anyway, I'm in the naval phase, and honestly, the Germans can't come out very far without triggering British entry. And I'm really kind of regretting the French Navy being out here. It's just some subs. The subs don't really serve me any purpose at all. I can't use them against Sweden. It's only British subs I can use there. And I can't... I'm not going to have an easy time facing, say, the Austrian fleet. There's a resource point cost to sending the battleships out. I don't know about the pre-battleships. It seems to me that they would have the same kind of cost, but I'm not positive. But without the pre-battleships, the French Navy really wouldn't be, or the battleships. The French Navy really wouldn't be able to handle the Austrian Navy. And actually, I probably don't want to face it without the battleship. So that's something to keep in mind. So I think I'm not going to move my Navy. And like I said, the German Navy really has to stay bottled up unless the English enter the war, with one exception. Nope. Not an exception. The Raiders, I think, can only work against the Brits. If I'm not mistaken. Yep. So, there's really not a lot I can do with the German Navy either. And if I try to slip it back around into Germany, it's going to get caught. I might be able to get it into Austria, though, if I so desire, the couple of cruisers that I have out. So, I think we're just going to skip the Admiralty. Weather's fixed. And at this point, it's good weather in Europe. I think it's lousy. It's too hot over here. Unfortunately, all those counters on that makes it hard to see, but I don't think there's anything terribly interesting I have to worry about there. So we go to the first fortnight, and no one's able to do anything but the French. For the French, I have to make 2 attacks. And the question of what to attack becomes kind of interesting because there's a lot of density here. So I'm gonna strip these out of the way and begin considering that a little bit more deeply. So I'm gonna focus my attacks on this. Well, I gotta do 2 hexes. That's the problem. Whew. Crappies. I might be able to actually take Strasbourg if I do things correctly. So I'm going to launch my first attack in this direction. I may need this. So I'm going to move this out of Tool. For 1. My second move is going to be to launch an attack on here. Now, this is hard to do on video, but I have 1, 2, 3, looks like only 4 core against 2. That's going to be a 2-to-1. The terrain is mountain, and oh, you know, something I forgot to mention was yellow units. Units with a yellow thing on them. With a yellow number. And somewhere, I think there's a French unit that qualifies, but I don't know where it is. Maybe it's in this stack. I do not see it. I hope it's not this thing, which is going to be a problem because I can't sail it up. So in 1914, those units have a strength of 4. I don't know if I haven't been able to see one. So maybe there isn't one. All right, so I said that I have 4 units to 2 in the mountains. We both have an effectiveness of 3. So I flip this over, and I look through this list, and there isn't a lot here. So no air superiority. There's no chance of reserves because the Germans aren't entrenched. +1 for attacking siege artillery. No. Attacker defender effectiveness. It's even. There's no leadership. The terrain effects chart for mountains is a -2. I have to pay a buck. I gotta check that German money. Germans should have 8. Okay, let me make sure I got all these right. Because France should have 4, they drop down to 3. Russia should have 5. I have them at 4 for some reason. I don't know why I had them wrong. And Britain is at 5. Okay, I guess we're set, right? Austria's at 3, yeah. Okay, so the French paid their buck to attack. They've made an attack. They get a TI. All right, and we were at -2 for the terrain. We have 2-to-1, which gives us no bonus. There's no entrenchment. There's nothing in place. This is not a good number to have coming at me. -2 gets me to 6. I have to take a loss on a level 3 unit, which I'll take. And the Germans take a replacement point. Now, because I'm in supply, I can take that as a replacement point. Alternatively, I could take it as a loss, but it would have to be against my number 1 unit. So I'll just take, the decent unit. So I'll just take the replacement point. That was 1 movement point. No, sorry, 2 movement points because I moved in out of Toul. That didn't work very well. My odds of a different attack working better, or of making that attack again and having it work any better, seem low. So I don't think I'm going to keep making that attack. So I'm going to call it off there. I rotated the counter so that I know I've moved it. And now I'm going to move these guys. And going into Luxembourg doesn't actually help me. I'm going to reverse my decision to violate Luxembourg. I don't feel like any of the information that was added made that decision. Basically, the thing that I see is I can't move into there and attack. So I don't want to. So instead, I move these guys. And I'll attack into this hex. The odds are obviously 1 to 1. The Germans are at even across the board. There's a fortress there. Well, that's life. I really can't see anything terribly useful that I can do otherwise. So I'm going to hit that hex. I'm at... the Germans could put the fortress up into play against me. And would they want to? The fortress isn't terribly useful if I can move into the French territory, but I'm not planning on an attack into Belgium. So I think I'd rather not lose the fortress. There's a rule that I haven't gone into. You can reduce your fortresses and turn them into money. Historically, the French did this, essentially stripping the guns out of some of their fortresses. I don't know if the Germans did as well. I'm not as familiar. But I know that the French did. Other countries may have as well. Because there are many kind of fortresses that aren't in danger. That could be stripped away. For example, the German East Front fortresses. Once Russia's in trouble, there's no reason to maintain those. Early in the game, though, you want them. So I think I'm going to commit the infantry. So we're on the 0 table on this attack. And this is second movement point. A 5. That's not a good roll. I don't want to take my reroll here, though. So I got to take 2 losses as the French and only 1 as the Germans. And these kind of slick counters are tough to cope with. I'll take a German loss here. I'm just putting these here. I have counter trays, but the counter trays, I can pull more out, but the counter trays are filled with stuff that I need for reinforcements. So I'm just going to keep my force pools kind of off board. I'll figure out where I want to keep them. So that's 1 German loss. The French take a big unit, but then I can take a secondary unit here as my loss. I have just succeeded in completing Plan 17. I honestly don't think I want to do more in that direction. That's another French attack. So another French buck and another TI because that was, again, a major battle. I don't think a press additional fights, the numbers just are not in my advantage. The German army is huge compared to the French army. So I think I may reposition some units, but outside of that, I'm just going to be moving things around, and that'll be the end of the first fortnight because no one else is allowed to move. The Germans, it's a little more interesting, I guess. I don't know. Because the French did not violate Luxembourg, and the Germans certainly didn't want to do that at this point, they're not going to be able to move into here, which is okay, because they couldn't move and attack anyway. I think I checked this. Yeah, forest takes up the rest of your movement point allowance. So you're not going to be able to manage some blitzkrieg through the gap there. So I'm probably going to move here into here and try to take the Longley bargaining chip. It takes a population center that can cause some issues, so it seems like a good idea, and it positions me in about the only real route towards Paris. I have a stronger army than the French do, but I don't really have the opportunity to use it. I may start moving some units eastward. Certainly the guys in Berlin are going to push forward, and we'll see where we get here. And if I can get myself through September without invading Belgium accidentally, I'm going to get the Swedes on my side, I think. So that's pretty sweet. In terms of the Russians, I don't have to worry about them too much right now. They're going to be moving forward, but they can't get very far, and these forests block some of the route up the railway. So I've got a little bit of time to start moving things forward. And one of the things is I'll probably move here out of Thorn. I'm out of their range there. Start moving out of Berlin with the reserves there. And then I don't think I want to spend money on a rail move. For the Austrians, it's more interesting because I do have to worry about the Russians over here. And I have the Serbs, who I was planning on defeating early. As you can see, I have Conrad down there rather than up on the Austrian border. I feel like the Austrian army made some early advances against the Russians, but for the most part, they really aren't terribly capable of moving quickly. Ooh, hey, back on the French turn. Let's do some stuff. I think we want to entrench. And we're going to entrench a lot of the units that we didn't move. The reason for that is there's a defensive benefit, and also I just don't think I can face this huge German army. But once it pushes eastward, if it starts leaving, I can always unentrench, or if I start getting a decent-sized force in place. This is going to be really an ugly situation, I think, for the Entente, though. I just don't see how they're going to hold out terribly well without Britain. For my first move, I moved out of here into here. I've got my guard unit, which does have a kind of yellowish tint to its attack value. So it's got an attack value of 4 this year. And I'm facing... well, an effectiveness of 4. I'm facing unentrenched French units sitting out here. Now I've got 2 to 1, and that does not give me anything if I recall correctly. No, I need 3 to 1. So I don't have a plus for that, but I have a +1 for the making sure there's not a river here. I do have a +1 for the higher effectiveness unit. And that's all I've got is 1 +1. I gotta spend a German point. Now I don't have to make any attacks, but you kind of want to get your TI up, and might as well gain terrain where I can. if I can. 8 gets me to 9, which is a pretty good result. I get 1. I do 2 to the French. Oh, and no attrition because they're not entrenched here. So the German guard is dead, but the French have to lose their main unit and a second unit. And now when I rebuild units, I have to rebuild kind of evenly in terms of forces on any given turn. So if the French want to build 1 unit, they can build a 3 each turn that they build the 1 unit. But if they want to build, just trying to make sure there's no yellow here, it's kind of hard to see. If I wanted to build 2 units, I would have to drop down to a 2, and if I wanted to build 3 units, I'd have to get the 1. Well, I probably don't want to build 3 unless I build 4 and get another 3-point unit, right? Okay. So what does the gain ground mean? It means the French have to retreat 1 to 3 hexes. I'll fall back here. All these German units moved. This was their second move. I brought them all in. Now I have a third move, and I could attack something else, including these trenches here. Of course, if I hit them, I can't I can't hit them again after I reduce them. I could go against the fortress, but there's a river there, and that's a penalty against me. Or I could just keep marching and try to undermine the French position a little bit. That doesn't sound terrible. I've gotten a kind of nice breakthrough here. I think the French are playing kind of stupidly, but that's okay. So what happens? I have a cav with me. Yeah, see, I don't really want to give up. So I could get the cav to here, but the French could kill that fairly easily, a single point of cav, a single effectiveness point of cav. So instead what I could do is just push a little further and move some of the front forward. This is okay because I've got my rail line here. These units have all moved. And now the interesting question is, what do I do to fill in that gap? And remember, France might declare war on Belgium if the line starts looking good to them. It's not looking like that's going to happen anytime soon, but depending on how hard the Russians are pressing them, it could be a possible route forward. The Germans decided to entrench over here, moved into place here. These are moved. I can tilt them. I'm kind of clumsy when I got one hand filled. These guys, though, are attacking at Nancy at +1 again, because I'm at 1-to-1 odds. But I figured I have a better unit. Let's see what happens. Well, I got a hell of a roll here, and the French are going to use their one-time advantage on this, because an 11 would mean a defender demoralization check, and I'd also lose the hex. So I'm going to force the Germans to re-roll on this. And instead I get an 8, which is also not terribly good. The Germans get to spend a simple replacement point, whereas the French lose a real unit. And I still got 2 movement points to keep launching attacks here. I left this unit back here rather than bring it up because it would have given me less attacks. Round of attack, same effect. The Germans lost 1 replacement point and the French lost a unit. Third round, we got another big die roll. And what we're going to see here is the Germans take their last replacement point. Is this terrible? No. Like I said, the Russians aren't going to be able to attack us, and the French have not yet gone for their second activation. They can attack us, but we'll see. This 4th German attack has succeeded, though, in getting a breakthrough and 3 hits. Well, 3 hits is going to wipe out the rest of the French army. The breakthrough doesn't mean much because I'm not tank units, or I'm not entrenched units. So the Germans push into this hex. I've used all 3 of my movement points in order to take that. The French, though, have a chance of being demoralized. A very good chance. And they are. So they get a demoralization hit. If I can find them. And now if that hits 7, we enter the crisis. Which seems a little deterministic for my taste. But we'll see how bad the crisis is. It doesn't generate a revolution, so it can't be too bad. I probably want to fill things in with entrenchments elsewhere. I don't have money, so I'm not going to be able to attack, but I may want to keep units mobile in the event so that I can use the reinforcement rules to pull in. And you can see we're pretty heavily armored, actually, at this point. We'll see what the French can do to throw them back. Now I've got to start moving some of these eastward. Kluck may want to move forward onto the French line simply because, hey, it looks like we're actually making some good ground there. The danger is, though, Britain comes in if we get too close, and Saint-Quentin is too close. And, well, we could actually take this space because we're still in rail connection. We don't have to follow the actual rail lines. Likewise, well, this one we can't get to. So we may have some problems just based on the infrastructure, on the rail network, unless we start building infrastructure, which, as you can see, I'm out of money, you know. Now, how terrible is that money? That's what I was trying to say. It's not that bad because I'm hitting a seasonal interphase right after August. That's why there's not much money in different people's hands. Anyway, I'll try to reposition the German units, and I'll go think about what the Austrians want to do. I've started the movement with the Germans. I completed that. With the Austrians, I'm not sure that they want to do anything up here in the north. In the south, I'm probably going to make an attempt on Pat Cole, but he's very good. He's got a 4 military. We haven't seen a leader in use, so I may zoom in on that a little bit. I'm going to cheat, though. Yeah, I like to cheat. I'm going to move the Montenegrins back here because I looked at the conquest rules. They're conquered if that falls. And then they can only rely on supply from a major power. And that's not a good thing. I was counting on them, you know, moving over, helping defend Serbia. I'm used to Montenegro being treated as part of Serbia, really. In this case, in this game, they really aren't. They have their own capital, and they kind of want to defend it. So I'll leave them there. I don't know that the Austrians are going to attack it. They did not get a movement, so they didn't get a chance to entrench yet. I'm not sure how much I want to attack Montenegro. I'm still thinking about it. But up here I've got Conrad attacking Pat Cole. Now, I've got problems because there's a river and that's a -1. This little riverboat thing doesn't help me. These Alpine units aren't going to help me across water. I have more units total, but not enough. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think I'm cheating. I got too many units here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, let me keep the 0 in there. I want to take that as a loss, so I'll just put a unit there. Okay. So, I'm going to spend an Austrian point to attack. Why? I don't have much chance of getting anywhere here. There is a fortress in Belgrade. I don't have any siege artillery. If I did, I could just knock that fortress away. Now, that brings up one thing. The German siege artillery, which is over here, is actually a loaned Austrian piece of artillery. But in game terms, it doesn't count as that. They give it to the Germans. That's a little different from some other games. Both La Grande Guerre and Der Weltkrieg have specifically treat that as a loaned unit that they have to give back to the Austrians by kind of the end of 1914. In this game, it doesn't really make sense because the Germans will have their own artillery about the same time, so instead they probably just give the Austrians the artillery back a little later. I don't remember seeing it coming up in the force pool, though, so I don't know about that. Oh, those are Brits. If the Austrians have any siege artillery, it's in the reinforcements, so it's probably coming on soon. Anyway, the big difference here, so I'm attacking across the river, so I've got a -1 for that. Forces don't matter. I have a +1 because I have a 3 effectiveness unit attacking a 2. So I break even there. I think the river's only -1, I hope. Yeah. This ID is when you're crossing a canal, there's assumed to be some sort of defensive force there. It doesn't count on rivers, though. So that defensive force is just a 1 effectiveness unit. Or maybe it's a 0, I'm not sure. Anyway, so I break even here. The thing that's different is, and I'll use a white die for the Serbs, is we have to roll for our command effectiveness. Patkul's a 4. If he rolls a 4 or less, he gets a +1. Conrad's only a 2. He needs a 2 or less. They both succeed, so now we're at 0. Did I spend my Austrian point? I did not. That means I didn't up this either. So here we go, and this is my first movement point. Does the river cost me anything? No, it has no effect on movement. And I get a nice big roll, a 10. Now, these aren't major power forces, so I don't have to worry about demoralization, but I do get a nice point distribution on them. I actually could have forced a -1 on this by making Belgrade the front unit. I think I probably would have done that, actually. It doesn't really hurt anyone, the Austrians, at all. So that would be, it's the same result, but the problem is my lead unit is now the fortress, which means I have to take the step loss on the fortress. It doesn't destroy the fortress. The fortress is reduced. I've got 2 hits. I think given the Serbian alignment, I'm going to say they were committed with the Russians. They don't have to be, I don't think, but if they did have to be committed somewhere, that would be where they would go. So we'll spend a point. Nope. Can't do that. Okay, the second point has to come off a unit. The reason is I'm not entrenched. So I'll take it off a unit here. And now Patkul has to retreat 1 to 3 hexes. I've got a problem if Belgrade falls. I'll no longer have supplies. And this is the Greek intervention that happened. Now this is, I've thrown more forces in than the Austrians historically did, with the intention of, I want to knock Serbia out as soon as possible. So, if I look at the conquest rolls, I believe what happens, if I can find them, a conquered nation immediately designates its capital as, of any single side major power as the host of the shadow government. Conquered nations now treat this new capital and the associated home country bargaining chips it has as their own for all purposes. They can use them for supply and muster. Nah, I don't have a capital. I don't have a problem. I got supply from my my other locations as well. So it's not going to cut me off completely. The problem is, of course, that I'm going to have to retreat. I'm only going to go 1 hex because I'd like to get back in there to defend it. And I believe we take a hit as well. So I got to lose an Austrian lead unit. And that's my best unit. Now, I'm not sure this applies by a strict reading of the rules, but as far as I'm concerned, if I had gotten down here, the 10 result, Pat Gould would have a chance of being killed. Because whenever you take a demoralization result, there's a chance the leader gets sacked. So that's one good reason not that the fortress is actually important there. Well, that was one movement point for the Austrians. I can keep going. I don't have a whole hell of a lot of money, but this is my most important attack. I do not get a TI because there's not 2 corps there, but I do get to make the attack again. Now I have big odds. So that fortress is reduced to an effectiveness of 2, and it only counts as 1 step. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 1 at even. I'm going to have a -1 against me because of the river. 5 to 1 says I get a +2 though. So now I'm up to +1 plus a possibility of Conrad throwing another one in. Conrad throws another one in. So I'm up to +2 on my attack on the fortress. And I get a 7. This is a minor battle. We each take a replacement point hit. I could take a loss on one of my big units. See, this fortress is going to be a pain in the butt. Although it isn't that potent. I can't lose the 0-2. I would have to lose one of my 2-point units. So, I could lose the boat, though. I hate to lose units. But that boat's not terribly valuable to me. I could sail up as far as here with it. And then I could be in either of these hexes, or I can sail down as far as here. I think I do not want to lose the boat yet, so I think I'm going to take another point of Austrian money. And now I know I have no more attacks, so I may want to... I wanted to make an attack here, damn me. I may want to actually kind of entrench to prevent attacks from happening. Here I don't want to because I don't need the movement. I probably don't want to up here, but along the rest of the Russian forces where I have these key locations, I may actually want to entrench, dig in a little bit, at least with some corps, so that the Russians can't just come in and knock me out. Although on the other hand, I feel like I have a pretty big army over there, and the Russians probably aren't going to try to chase me. French forces trying to cover their butt over here. I kind of don't want to move this. I could spend a movement to rail it. That would be one of my last French points, and I could get it up, oh, I don't know, really get it just about anywhere. The question is whether I want to, cover the areas that I'm in danger in, or put it where it's good in the mountains. It's not particularly an important unit defensively. The fact that it's alpine means it's good on offense in the mountains. It gets +1 to its effectiveness. I'm not in terrible danger of being cut off here. I might lose the hex, but that's it. But it is a riverline hex. So instead, I could move this here, spend the 1, drop this on the riverline here. I think that's worthwhile. So I think I'm going to spend the French point to move into there. And that kind of closes off. Now if the Germans don't go through Belgium, I'm a little safer. Over on the Russian side, we see the Tannenberg situation beginning to evolve. We see the Russians digging in back here, just like the Austrians are. Neither of us really want to make this fight. The Russians want to take advantage of their numerical superiority that's temporary, but we're moving into another turn, and the Germans are going to get, a wave of troops, which probably is going to go over on the East Front. See what we have. Second fortnight, there's nothing in the aerodrome. I don't think anything's out of supply, and there's not going to be a revolution. So we're at the end of the turn, and that means I can move us over here, but not quite. We're actually in between because we're hitting the autumn interphase. And that's where we're going to start our next turn. I think I've spent about an hour on this one, so it's about time to send it up. And let's go.